had been Steven's simp for 6 years, at his beck and call, easily summoned and just as easily discarded. When he was wrapping his arms around another woman, drinking a cross-cupped wedding toast. I was in the hospital being diagnosed with leukemia, told I had only 3 months left to live. Later, he knelt beside my hospital bed, crying and begging me to accept a bone marrow transplant. How ridiculous. I never planned on staying alive in the first place. Chapter 1. The moment I got the hospital's diagnosis report, I called Steven, again and again. No answer. The doctor's words still echoed in my ears. Leukemia. You should be hospitalized as soon as possible. If you actively cooperate with treatment, it's not without hope. Leaning back in my chair, I showed no expression. If I don't get treated, how long do I have? You're still so young. Why wouldn't you treat? How long? The doctor looked at me like I was crazy. After a long pause, he said, at most, 3 months. I smiled gratefully. Thank you. 3 months. That was enough. I had just walked out of the hospital when my phone rang. The caller ID said Steven, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. Sister-in-law. Steven's drunk. Come quick. Steven was drinking? My heart clenched instantly. How could you let him drink? That could get him killed. Quinn stammered, unable to explain clearly, but through the noisy background, I heard a woman's voice. Wendy, Steven's goddess. I almost forgot, today was the day Wendy returned to the country. The private room was buzzing with excitement. A group of people crowded together, craning their necks, heads pressed close as they egged them on. Steven, the male lead of the night, tilted his head back, his arm entwined with Wendy's. The two of them drinking a cross-cupped toast. That expression, a look of indulgent satisfaction I had never once seen on his face. Amid the cheering, I pushed the door open and walked in. Only Quinn called out, sister-in-law, while everyone else looked at me with the detached curiosity of spectators watching a show. It was laughable. After following Steven around for so many years, I had never truly been able to fit into his circle. In their eyes, only a goddess like Wendy was worthy of Steven. Wendy turned her head when she saw me and smiled calmly, unconcerned. Esther, you came. Slap. Before she could finish, I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. Wendy covered her cheek, staring at me in disbelief. The cheering stopped abruptly. The room fell into dead silence. Wendy, maybe everyone else doesn't know, but don't you? I demanded sharply. What condition Steven's body is in, can he even drink alcohol? But the very next second, my left cheek was violently knocked to the side. It was Steven. He stood in front of Wendy, his eyes ferocious, like he wanted to devour me alive. Esther, are you insane? What right do you have to hit Wendy? What right? I took a deep breath, forcing down the metallic taste in my mouth. Steven must have forgotten. When he underwent his heart transplant surgery, it was I who stayed by his side day and night without rest. And Wendy, knowing full well how dangerous his surgery had been, still chose without hesitation to leave the country and chase her dreams. In the end, the one without the right was me? Steven, all these years I've given in to you, protected you, terrified that anything might happen to you. My throat tightened until I could barely continue. That's because I truly believed that one day I could warm that fragile heart of yours. But now I realize I was wrong. You don't have a heart at all. I closed my eyes, an overwhelming exhaustion surging through me. Steven, this is where we end. I took off the couple's diamond ring and placed it in front of him. You're free now. A wave of dizziness swept over me. Staggering, I walked out of the bar, using the last bit of strength I had. I flagged down a taxi and climbed in. Reflected in the car window was my disheveled figure. I covered my nose, blood seeped through my fingers and trickled downward. Ghost-like. Staring at the window, I forced out a bitter smile. Esther, you're really something. Still worrying about whether drinking will hurt Steven's heart, when the one who's about to die is you. Chapter 2. The moment I returned to the place Steven and I used to share, my phone rang like a death knell. From the receiver came Steven's furious roar, stabbing straight into my eardrums. Esther, I don't care where you are, get to the hospital right now. Wendy's face is swollen on one side because you hit her. Come over and apologize to her. Insane. I hung up, blocked him, and deleted the contact in one smooth motion. The nosebleed wouldn't stop. I braced myself against the sink, rinsing again and again, but the blood just wouldn't wash away. The person in the mirror was frighteningly thin, cheekbones jutting out, dark circles heavy beneath my eyes, looking every bit like a ghost. Wendy's face was just swollen. Blood, however, was seeping from the corner of my mouth. That slap from Steven, he hadn't held back at all. I pulled out a suitcase and began packing my things. But looking around the entire apartment, there was surprisingly nothing I truly wanted to take with me. In the end, I chose only 3 items and stuffed them into the suitcase. A photo album, a notebook, a protective talisman. I casually flipped open the notebook. Inside, page after page was filled with densely written notes, more meticulous than any notes I ever took in college. Dietary notes. Eat less high-sodium food. It increases the burden on the heart. Avoid spicy and irritating foods. They can cause rapid heartbeat and vascular constriction or dilation, which is harmful for managing heart disease. Avoid excessive drinking of alcohol and soup. Hard-to-digest foods can trigger cardiac problems. Clothing notes. A thick notebook. Every detail accounted for. Not many people knew Steven had heart disease. He didn't take it seriously himself, but I was neurotic about it, constantly anxious and afraid of losing him. Greasy food. Fried food, I absolutely forbade him from touching them. If it got cold, he had to put on more clothes. He wasn't allowed to curl up on the sofa for too long. He had to exercise appropriately, 6,000 steps every day. For 6 years, I took good care of him, and now, he was healthy enough to drink a cross-cup toast with someone else. I placed the notebook on the living room coffee table, right in the most conspicuous spot. Then I took a taxi to the old district. 6 years ago, I bought a house here, remote, but blessedly quiet. In the courtyard stood a tall silk tree, its branches spreading wide, shading half the sky. The walls inside the house were covered in photographs. I sat there blankly, staring at them for a long time. Then, one by one, I pasted the photos I brought onto the empty spaces. The seagulls of South City, blotting out the sky like clouds. The sky over Inner Mongolia, hanging so low it felt ready to collapse. The lakes of Qinghai, so deep green they made me dizzy just looking at them. We really did have good times. The year we visited the ancient town, we wandered hand in hand through winding, narrow alleys. There were many old women setting up stalls in the alleys, braiding colorful strands of hair. I sat on a small stool while one of them worked her fingers through my hair, praising me for being pretty. He found it amusing and insisted on trying it too, so a few crooked, uneven braids appeared on my head. That night, when we returned to the guest house, I found out those braids weren't something you could just do casually. They were also called widow braids. He didn't take it seriously at all and even teased me. What? Afraid I'll die? Ugh, so unlucky. I cried and threw a fit, insisting they be taken out. He couldn't win against me, so we undid them together until well past midnight. Later I got impatient and simply grabbed a pair of scissors and cut them all off. It looked worse than a dog-chewed mess. The next day, somehow, he found a wig for me to wear. Believe it or not, it actually looked pretty good. The day we went to Jade Dragon Snow Mountain, it rained. Up on the mountain, everything was shrouded in mist. There was nothing to see at all. Seeing me upset, he coaxed me gently. No big deal. We'll come back next year. But there was no next year. He got busier and busier. Sometimes he even worked overtime until 1 or 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, always afraid his heart wouldn't be able to handle staying up so late. So I sat under the street lamp outside and waited. In the summer, mosquitoes were everywhere. My legs were covered in bites, and I could only hop around in place. But the moment I heard the sound of a car horn, I would jump up instantly, running toward him while calling out loudly, "Steven, Steven." Chapter 3. The shrill ringtone cut sharply into my dream. A violent headache hit me all at once. My stomach churned as if an enormous hand were wringing my organs together. I curled into myself, enduring the pain, reached under the pillow for my phone, and answered the call. "Esther, where's my medicine?" Steven's cold, detached voice came through the line. I replied instinctively, First drawer of the nightstand. It's cold, put on something thicker. The thermal vest is. I opened my eyes. A damp, mold-stained ceiling came into view. Something flashed through my mind. I brought the phone closer and glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number. That's right, I clearly remembered blocking him. Steven. We're over. My voice cooled instantly. He snapped back. Furious. Then come take your stuff away. Seeing it pisses me off. So Wendy could move in without feeling annoyed, right? I hugged the hot water bottle tighter. Throw it out. I don't want it anymore. He clearly hadn't expected that. After a long silence, he snorted coldly. Esther, name a price, otherwise, I won't feel right about it. I clenched my teeth and waited until the pain subsided before speaking slowly. I don't want anything. No belongings. No money. And not you either. Before he could respond, I hung up. As early as 6 years ago, Steven had already decided I was a gold digger. Back then, his heart disease had flared up suddenly. He lay in the hospital bed with tubes all over his body. Yet his tone was aggressive, barking the same word at everyone. Get lost. For hired caregivers quit one after another. I was the fifth. He had a terrible temper. When he got angry, he smashed things. The young nurses were all afraid of him. Only me. I couldn't be driven away. And I couldn't be cursed away either. Once, he suddenly lost his temper and knocked the bowl of hot porridge out of my hands. The thick soup splashed over the back of my hand, instantly reddening the skin. I didn't care about the pain at all, only about him. Are you feeling unwell? Should I call the doctor? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Then he turned his face away. Why didn't you dodge? If I dodged, who would take care of you? Stop pretending. Esther, don't think I don't know. You're doing all this for money. Yes, I was doing it for money. As long as he was safe and alive, he could say I was doing it for anything. Steven probably didn't know that I loved sneaking close to his chest while he slept, carefully listening to his heartbeat. Steven. I would call him softly, listening to the thump-thump of his heart. Feeling that he was still alive, I was happier than anyone. Compared to Steven's indifference, his parents actually liked me a lot. Once, his mother joked, Esther, you're so lovable. If our Steven were lucky enough to marry a girl like you, that would be wonderful. I pressed my lips together and smiled. Steven, standing nearby, looked at me darkly. I knew Steven didn't like me. There was always a goddess living in his heart. I had never imagined that one day I would end up by his side, becoming his lover. I simply wanted to protect him. That was all. The turning point came when I went on a business trip to City A. I heard there was a nearby temple, protective talismans blessed by a master there were said to be frighteningly effective. I ran up the mountain path several times before finally obtaining one for Steven. Because of that, I was left with a scar on my forehead. The day I handed it to Steven, his eyes reddened instantly, as if he had been genuinely moved. But I knew. In the alumni group chat, a photo was spreading like wildfire. Wendy had started dating a blonde, blue-eyed foreign guy overseas. The two of them were making out wildly in public, completely ignoring everyone else. Rumor had it they were about to get married. That day, Steven was a little unhinged. He asked me again and again, Esther, are you willing to be with me? My throat was dry. I nodded over and over. Of course. When it came to him, I had never hesitated. But in the 6 years we were together, he never once said he liked me. Not even once. Not long after we moved in together, I asked him for $500,000. I used it to buy this apartment. Whenever I asked him for money, he never questioned it. But the contempt that occasionally surfaced in his eyes, it hurt to see. In his eyes, I was probably unbearably ugly. Chapter 4. I stayed holed up in the house for half a month. At first, clinging to those beautiful memories, the days weren't too hard to get through. But gradually, I began to run frequent fevers and feel dizzy. My hair fell out in large clumps, not to mention the needle-like pain stabbing through my entire body, tormenting me until I was barely alive. Painkillers became my only salvation. From 3 pills a day, I increased to 6, then 12. Half a month later, Steven found me. At the time, I was sitting in a small hole-in-the-wall diner, having ordered a few simple home-style dishes. I didn't really have any appetite. I just felt that this place held a different kind of meaning. Outside the glass window, a black business van pulled over. Someone sat down across from me. I knew I'd find you here. I looked up and met Steven's gaze. How did you get so thin? My hand holding the chopsticks trembled slightly. I said nothing. How long are you planning to hide from me? When I didn't respond, his voice rose despite himself, drawing glances from the people around us. Let's forget about the past. Come back with me today. I won't hold it against you. I set my chopsticks down with a sharp motion, completely losing my appetite, leaving money on the table. I stood up and walked out of the diner. I hadn't gone far when Steven grabbed my wrist. His anger flared. Esther, even throwing a tantrum has its limits. I stumbled as he yanked me back. My vision darkened. People and objects blurred, as if a mosaic had been slapped over the world in an instant. Even so, I forced myself to shake off his hand. Steven, how many times do I have to say it? We have nothing to do with each other anymore. I pointed toward the woman in the back seat of the black van. The window lowered halfway. You already have Wendy, so please, don't come bothering me again, okay? Perhaps there was a trace of pleading in my tone, because Steven's expression loosened for a moment. He looked at me quietly, as if trying to tell whether I was lying or telling the truth. How laughable. From the moment I was sentenced by death itself, 3 months left, I had already decided. In my final days, all I wanted was peace and quiet. Alone. No one had the right to come and stir up my emotions. Steven least of all. Steven. Wendy hadn't gotten out of the car. Only half of her snow-white face visible. Through the car window. She called to him softly from afar. Steven left, watching the car speed away. I felt a touch of irony. So Steven could be obedient sometimes. Just depended on the person. That evening, I took a taxi to the city hospital, hoping to get more painkillers. Esther. I turned around. It was Dr. Vic, Steven's attending physician. Back when Steven's condition was unstable, I went to see him every few days. I could rattle off those tongue-twisting drug names without hesitation. He used to laugh and say, "Relax a bit, you're more nervous than Steven is." Now I was bundled up like a rice dumpling, my cap pulled low, yet he still recognized me at a glance. "Long time no see. Do you have time to talk?" I didn't have the heart to refuse. The moment he sat down, he went straight to the point. "What's going on between you and Steven lately?" "Nothing. We're adults. If it doesn't work, you break it off." Maybe my tone was unpleasant. He looked me over, hesitated for a long while, then said, "I don't mean to play mediator, but Steven's been acting out lately. His mother is very worried." As he spoke, he handed me his phone. It was Steven's WeChat feed. The most recent post was a photo of him and Wendy at Disneyland. Behind them loomed a towering drop tower, with the silhouette of a roller coaster visible in the distance. A Lena Bell plush was placed between Steven and Wendy, its fluffy face wearing a sweet, happy smile. Caption, "Let's do something thrilling." I couldn't help clenching my fist. Completely reckless. You know him best. Could you try to talk some sense into him? Dr. Vic. I interrupted, entering Wendy's phone number into his phone. From now on, if it's about Steven, contact her instead. She's the one who can actually make him listen. Chapter 5. I went to a photo studio to take my posthumous portrait. I hadn't planned to do this originally. Taking a posthumous photo felt like an announcement of death, something my instincts desperately avoided. But an accident happened the night before. I got up in the middle of the night to drink some water and fell. My knee split open, and the blood wouldn't stop flowing. It soaked through my pajamas, then seeped onto the floor. My limbs hurt as if they were being torn apart alive. I couldn't get up. All I could do was lie flat on my back on the floor for the entire night. The people in the photos on the wall looked down at me under the dim yellow light, their eyes seeming to carry a trace of sorrow. I held on until dawn before finally finding the strength to crawl up, get dressed, and go take my posthumous photo. If it was going to be hung on the wall someday, my vanity told me I should at least look presentable. As usual, when I brushed my teeth, my mouth filled with blood. It was strange. I hadn't even undergone chemotherapy. Yet my hair was falling out in handfuls. My eyebrows were gone too. I looked like a skeleton wrapped in human skin. I put on some light makeup in front of the mirror, but I was still ugly beyond saving. When the photographer heard I wanted a posthumous portrait, he confirmed again. A posthumous photo? Are you sure? I nodded, seeing how gaunt I looked. A hint of pity appeared in his eyes as he led me into the studio. The studio next door was also shooting, apparently wedding photos. It sounded lively, with waves of laughter and an unmistakable air of joy. The process was quick. In the photo, I curved my lips into a smile. My brows and eyes were full of warmth, but I was far too thin, with an indescribable exhaustion showing through. The lipstick was a waste. I couldn't help feeling a little regret. Holding the photo as I walked out, I passed by the neighboring studio and instinctively stopped. The door wasn't fully closed. Voices drifted out. Wow, Wendy, this one looks even better on you than on the model. Absolutely stunning. When Steven gets here, he's totally going to be mesmerized. They've been waiting almost 2 hours. Steven should be here soon, right? Through the crack in the door, I could vaguely see Wendy, surrounded by a group of close friends. Her makeup was flawless, her mood radiant, wearing a long wedding dress. She spun in circles in front of the mirror. My legs went weak. I steadied myself against the wall, nausea surging up my throat again. I clenched the protective talisman tightly in my hand. My memories were yanked far back in an instant. This studio belonged to one of his friends, though it was in the old district. It had a long history, passed down from father to son. The photographers and makeup artists were highly skilled, so it was well known far and wide. Once, I had also dared to hope that one day, I could take wedding photos here. Back then, I always thought there was still plenty of time. By chance, he had once been pulled by a friend to be a print model. A white shirt and black dress pants accentuated his narrow waist and long legs. And with his good looks, his photo was hung at the front of the studio to attract customers. The effect was surprisingly good. Business boomed for a while. Later, when they needed wedding models, he recommended me. I walked out from behind the curtain wearing a wedding dress and couldn't help complaining. It's suffocating. This dress fits way too perfectly. He had been lounging lazily on the sofa, propping his face with one hand, lost in thought. But then he sprang to his feet. In the huge floor-length mirror, he stood tall in a suit, and I stood opposite him in a pure white wedding gown. Facing each other, we looked just like a newlywed couple. I remember that afternoon. His gaze was burning, as if he couldn't tear his eyes away from me. After a long moment, he smiled and said, "My little bride." For a split second, I almost had an illusion that he was about to cry. Unfortunately, that day, there was a torrential downpour, and the studio equipment malfunctioned. The wedding photos were never taken. Maybe this was fate. I was never meant to wear a wedding dress, hold the hand of the one I loved, and promise a lifetime together. Chapter 6. When I reached my front door, I vaguely made out someone standing there. As I got closer, I realized it was Steven's mother. She was wearing a fur coat, rubbing her hands together from the cold. Another mediator. The moment she saw me, she hurried over. "Esther, I've been waiting for so long. You're finally back." She reached out warmly to grab my hand. I kept both hands in my pockets and looked at her blankly. "Auntie, what do you need from me?" Seeing my indifference, she awkwardly withdrew her hand. "Esther, all these years, you've treated Steven so well, there's nothing to criticize. You're the only daughter-in-law I acknowledge. That brat Steven, you know what he's like, willful and impulsive. But his heart isn't bad, and his feelings for you were never fake. For Auntie's sake, will you come back with me?" Her face was flushed red from the wind, her eyes filled with eagerness. She had seen how humble I was in front of Steven. That was when we hadn't been together very long. She had come over to bring Steven his medicine. While I cleaned the apartment, as I was tidying the bookshelf, I accidentally knocked down a book. Photos slipped out and scattered across the floor. I froze. They were close-up photos of Steven and Wendy, cheek to cheek. More than a dozen of them. As if I had stumbled upon some forbidden secret, I hurriedly crouched down to gather them. Steven happened to see it and flew into a rage. "Esther, why are you rummaging through other people's things?" Whenever Wendy was involved, He completely lost control. When he got angry, I panicked. I'm sorry. I'll clean it up right away. Don't be mad. He slapped the photos out of my hands and shouted. Why do you always make me angry? Then he turned and was about to walk out. It was already dark outside. I stood in front of him, spreading my arms wide. You can't leave. I won't let you go. Steven was nearly 6'2". I had to tilt my head up to look at him, my voice dropping as I pleaded. I was wrong. He stared at me for a few seconds, then turned and went back into the bedroom. His mother sighed nearby, saying nothing. Those grievances, thinking about them now, they felt as vivid as if they were happening again. Auntie, I'm sorry. You should go home. The moment she heard that, her eyes reddened. If it weren't for Steven going crazy lately, I wouldn't have had the nerve to bother you. A few days ago, he was street racing and ended up in the hospital. He had barely gotten out of bed before he ran off to drink, and he even got into a fight with Quinn when Quinn tried to stop him. If this keeps up, how can his heart take it? He doesn't say it, but I know everything he's doing is just to get your attention. Please, take pity on Auntie and go talk some sense into him, okay? Her tears fell. To be honest, I envied Steven a little. No matter what mistakes he made, there was always someone who loved him. I stretched out my gaunt hand, took a pack of tissues from my pocket, and handed it to her. Auntie, I watched over him for 6 years. If 6 years weren't enough to make him learn to cherish his own body, then watching over him for 60 more years would still be useless. Besides, his heart is in his own body. If something goes wrong, he's the only one who will suffer. Instead of coming to persuade me, you'd be better off spending more time persuading him. After all, you're his real mother. I'm nothing to him anymore. Esther, how did you become like this? Auntie, goodbye. I maintained the last shred of dignity I had and walked inside. My whole body slid down along the wall. If this dragged on for even one more minute, I would have collapsed at her feet like a dog, unable to get back up. Steven was recklessly courting death. What he wanted to do no longer mattered. Right now, I couldn't even take care of myself anymore. Chapter 7. A few days later, the north wind wasn't as biting anymore. I moved a rattan chair out and lay beneath the silk tree. Basking in the sun, the sunlight felt cold. I drifted into a long, dragging dream. When I opened my eyes again, a blurry figure was standing in front of me. I blurted out, Steven. The figure laughed. The sound was clearer than a silver bell, sharp enough to make my ears ache. Esther, are you awake or not? Only then did I see the person clearly. Wendy. She lifted her chin, her gaze sweeping around the place. Clicking her tongue, she said, So you moved here? You do know how to pick a spot. The last time I saw you near the photo studio, I thought I'd mistaken you for someone else. In the state you're in now, even if Steven came, he probably wouldn't recognize you. I stared at her vivid red lips opening and closing and finally frowned. What exactly are you trying to say? Oh, almost forgot. Wendy pulled a red invitation card out of her Hermes bag. I came to deliver this. Deliver what? My mind lagged a beat. My engagement invitation with Steven. As if afraid I wouldn't hear clearly, she deliberately bent down and spoke more slowly. We're planning to hold the wedding at Tianya Haijiao in Sanya, South City. You must come, okay? After saying that, Wendy placed the invitation on my leg and turned to leave, but I grabbed her arm. No. I stood up too quickly. My vision instantly washed out in blinding white. I couldn't see anything anymore. Even so, I clenched my teeth and repeated toward Wendy's direction. No, why not? Esther, do you really think Steven will come back to you? Stop dreaming. Esther, what's wrong with you? Esther! In the moment I collapsed, I thought I saw Steven's mocking face. He said, Esther, didn't you dream of getting married in South City? Fine, then I'll go there with Wendy. I'll make you watch Wendy and me being deeply in love, receiving everyone's blessings. I'll make you regret it. Regret leaving me. My consciousness gradually drifted away. When I opened my eyes again, I realized I was lying in a hospital bed. To my upper left hung a bag of bright red blood, steadily flowing into my body. Unexpectedly, Wendy was standing by the bedside. Seeing that I was awake, she patted her chest. her face full of lingering fear. You scared me to death. I thought you were trying to scam me. Leukemia, so it's real. Looks like my illness hadn't stayed hidden. She knew. When I didn't react, she squeezed onto the edge of the bed, looking a little nervous. Does Steven know? Oh, so that was what she was afraid of. After 6 years and countless twists, she and Steven had finally reunited. Of course she was afraid I'd ruin her happy ending. If he knew, I said lightly, do you think he'd still marry you? Even I felt that sentence lacked conviction. Yet Wendy, confident by nature, fell silent. As if I had actually frightened her. What was she worried about? In Steven's heart, I wasn't even worth a single strand of Wendy's hair. Wendy glanced at me, her expression a little stiff. How long do you have left to live? I looked down at myself and helplessly spread my hands. 1 month? 20 days? Either way, not long. After Wendy left, snow began to fall outside the window. A few scattered snowflakes landed on the glass, only to vanish the next instant. I didn't know whether Wendy would tell Steven that I was about to die. I didn't know how Steven would react if he found out. The choice was hers, but if I were her, I wouldn't say a word. Chapter 8. Wendy made a wrong decision. Only a few days after I got home, Steven showed up at my door. The knocking was thunderous. Outside, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Esther! Esther! Each call grew more impassioned, like wailing at a funeral. Afraid of disturbing the neighbors, I endured the pain in my joints and forced myself out of bed. Stretching out my skeletal, withered hand, I found I didn't even have the strength to open the door. So useless. I gave a self-mocking smile, gathered every ounce of strength I had, and finally cracked the door open a sliver. When Steven saw me, he froze in shock, then let out a breath. His eyes instantly turned red. Why, didn't you tell me? In 6 years with Steven, I had rarely seen him look this fragile. So the words "was it necessary?" got stuck in my throat and never came out. We stood there in a stiff silence for a few seconds. Then Steven snapped back into his usual arrogance, frowning as he shouted, Esther, what do you take me for? If Wendy hadn't told me, were you planning to hide this from me for the rest of your life? How can you be this vicious? In the past, because of his weak heart, I always gave in to him and never raised my voice. Now that I had 1 foot in the grave, I had nothing left to worry about. I might as well stop pretending. Are you done? If you're done, get lost. You're annoying. Something I said clearly struck a nerve. His body swayed, as if he might lose his balance. His gaze locked onto me. The corners of Steven's eyes flushed red. After a long moment, he trembled as he forced out a sentence. Esther, you're being too willful. Come to the hospital with me now. He reached out to grab me. I dodged. These two really were a perfect match. One came to deliver an engagement invitation. The other came to show last-minute concern before my death, both afraid I might die too peacefully. I didn't have the energy to argue. I waved my hand at him like shooing a fly and moved to close the door. Steven panicked. One hand slammed against the doorframe as he desperately tried to wedge himself into the narrowing gap. How is this none of my business? Esther? Don't gamble with your life out of spite. Come with me right now. I'll take you to the hospital. I've already hired the top medical experts in the country. If that's not enough, we'll go abroad. Could this man not understand human language? I ignored him and pushed the door harder. The gap grew narrower. His hand was crushed and twisted out of shape. Yet he seemed unable to feel pain. One hand wasn't enough. He shoved the other in as well. Esther, listen to me. Medical technology is so advanced now. I've looked it up. There are plenty of successful cases. Seeing his knuckles about to break, I let go. He lowered his bruised, purpling hands, still unwilling to give up. Don't want to go to the hospital? Fine. Then I'll move in today and take care of you here. As he spoke, he turned sideways, trying to squeeze inside. Steven, I'll go to the hospital. I'll go. Okay? Seeing that the door was about to be ruined by him, I gave in. I didn't allow him inside. I quickly grabbed a few changes of clothes and followed him out. Steven walked ahead, a triumphant smile on his face. I followed behind, expressionless. The sunlight stretched our shadows across the marble path, one on the left, one on the right. As if we belonged to two different worlds. Chapter 9. Stephen took me to the best hospital in the city for a full body examination. After he got the results, he didn't say a word. I knew it. It must have gotten worse again. The body doesn't lie. These past few days, I drifted between sleep and wakefulness. Bleeding started from all over my body, coughing up blood, vomiting blood, blood in my urine, blood in my stool. If Stephen hadn't come, I had planned to die in the house I bought myself. The specialist said chemotherapy was needed, donor matching, then a bone marrow transplant. I refused no matter what. Why bother struggling anymore? I didn't have many days left. Stephen tried to persuade me. I told him to get lost. When he realized that threatening me didn't work and that I wasn't afraid at all, he changed tactics. He clung to my bedside, speaking softly as if begging, "Be good. This isn't the time to throw a tantrum. I'll definitely find a suitable bone marrow donor." I stared at him blankly. At this point, even telling him to get lost felt like a waste of energy. "Esther, did you hear what I said? Don't give up, okay?" He spoke softly, like a kitten, pain appearing on his face as his hand pressed against his chest. Only then did I show the slightest reaction. But the very next second, I saw through him. Too clumsy. Just like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there was a company banquet for Stephen's firm. I didn't know anyone there and could only force a stiff smile. Playing along awkwardly, he left me behind to deal with it and disappeared, worried that he might be secretly drinking behind my back. I searched everywhere for him, through a curtain of vines. I vaguely heard someone talking on the phone. I tried calling out, "Stephen." No response. When I walked around the vines, I saw Stephen sitting in the corridor, his face full of dejection. "What's wrong?" I touched his face, casually wiping away the moisture at the corner of his eye. That was the first time I had ever seen Stephen cry. "It's nothing. Just, my heart doesn't feel well." He bent over, clutching his chest, looking extremely uncomfortable. My understanding and judgment of heart disease far surpassed his own. Real or fake, I could tell at a glance. Later, while Stephen was asleep, I checked his phone. The number showed it was overseas. Who it was, there was no need to say. Maybe the memory tugged at a nerve. My blood surged, and my vision instantly blurred. Stephen was badly frightened. He didn't even bother finishing his act of fake heart pain and hurried over. "Esther, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Go away. I don't want to see you." As I spoke, I grabbed something at random and threw it in his direction. He left in a sorry state. The matter of chemotherapy was put on hold. He never dared to bring it up again. Renee peeked her head in from the doorway, looking at me timidly. She was the little patient next door. She had already undergone chemotherapy twice, never cried out in pain, and hopped around like a little monkey, always sneaking into other rooms. I tempted her with snacks. She hesitated at the door for a while, but in the end, she couldn't resist. Before long, we had become familiar. I told her fairy tales, and she listened with wide, nervous eyes, barely daring to breathe. Stephen pushed the door open, interrupting my story. I shot him an impatient sideways glance. He pursed his lips, set the fruit down, and quietly left again. The story continued. Renee kept sneaking glances at me, looking like she wanted to say something but didn't dare. I asked her, "What's wrong?" She pouted and thought for a long time before finally saying, "That handsome big brother is kind of strange. The nurse said when you're asleep, he always watches you, crying one moment and smiling the next." He probably thought I was asleep. What he didn't know was that I hadn't truly slept for a long time. Morphine no longer worked. Last night, before he came, I had been given a dose of sedatives just to lie down. In my hazy state, I felt a pair of eyes fixed firmly on me, too direct, like glaring incandescent lights. Not long after, I vaguely heard sobbing, like the mournful cries of a small animal. I thought I was hallucinating. Now that I thought about it, that person had been Stephen. When Stephen came again, he brought me some porridge. I pretended not to notice the burn on his fingers and said I had no appetite. After he left, I poured the porridge straight into the trash. Anything belonging to Stephen, I didn't want to touch it. He seemed to sense something. The next day, he stood beside me like a statue, supervising my meals. You haven't eaten anything today. How about having some porridge? He coaxed me like a child, spoon held up to my mouth, his eyes filled with pleading. Steven seemed like a completely different person. In the past, he would never have said the words "how about it" to me. I stared at him for a moment, then raised my hand and knocked the bowl out of his grasp. The scalding soup spilled out, his skin instantly turning red from the burn. Yet he reacted like a child who had done something wrong, hurriedly grabbing tissues and squatting down. "It's okay. I'll clean it up. It'll be fine in a moment. Don't worry, okay?" Someone as proud as Steven, when had he ever been this humble? He was always disciplined and composed, but recently he had visibly grown haggard. He no longer bothered grooming himself, dark stubble shadowing his face. He had restrained his explosive temper and begun to lower his gaze when speaking to people. And yet, I still couldn't talk to him properly. The endless pain had worn away what little patience I had left. The moment I opened my mouth, anger spilled out. I couldn't control it at all. In a daze, I realized the current Steven was becoming more and more like the version of me from those past 6 years. Chapter 10. Wendy came, but Steven blocked her outside the ward. The two of them argued fiercely. I could vaguely hear Wendy crying. "Even if you won't think about me, won't you think about Auntie? If it doesn't work this time, fine, but what if it does work? Are you planning to ignore me too then?" I didn't have the energy to care about them. Renee and I huddled together, working on a jigsaw puzzle. She had just gone through another round of chemotherapy. Her little face was scrunched up like a steamed bun. Yet she didn't cry. When she came to see me, she looked listless and drained. I took out her favorite Elsa puzzle. Only then did she perk up a little. Her attention was soon drawn to the arguing outside. She cocked her head and listened for a long while, then suddenly said, "That handsome big brother loves you a lot." The way she sounded like a little grown-up made me laugh. "You little brat, do you even know what love is?" She pouted in protest, blinking her big eyes. "Of course I do. My mommy loves me. She wants me to live and is willing to give me her blood." The nurse said that handsome big brother also wants to give you blood. But the blood is different, so it can't be used. By giving blood, she probably meant donating bone marrow. Steven secretly went for bone marrow matching behind my back? I was a little surprised. As she spoke, Renee grew downcast, completely losing interest in the puzzle, probably because her own matching hadn't gone well either. We only finished half of the puzzle before the nurse told us to rest, so she hooked her pinky with mine. "Promise, we'll finish it together tomorrow." She hopped out cheerfully, like a little bunny. I was just about to smile when Steven pushed the door open. My mood instantly shifted from sunny to overcast. He seemed afraid to look at me, only sneaking glances from the corner of his eye as he tested the waters. "The weather's nice today. Do you want to go outside and get some sun?" I didn't want to respond, but the sunlight outside was too tempting. I nodded. It really was a rare good winter day, no harsh wind, just gentle sunshine. There were quite a few people on the lawn. Steven pushed my wheelchair and stood beside me on the steps. For a moment, there was a quiet, peaceful sense of contentment. After a long while, I said, "Steven, I don't want to die in a hospital. Can you take me to the grasslands?" He knew. The Hulunber grasslands, I had talked about them countless times, to the point where I could recite travel guides by heart. Now I was nothing but skin and bones. My days numbered. While I still had breath left, I wanted to go somewhere I truly wanted to see. Steven seemed to be suppressing something. His jaw was tightly clenched. "When you get better, I'll go with you. Let's do chemotherapy first, okay?" I lowered my eyes in disappointment. Such a beautiful day, and it ended badly again. The next day, I was half asleep when heart-wrenching cries erupted from the ward next door. A terrible premonition rose in my chest. I braced myself against the wall and shuffled over, breaking out in a cold sweat. Inside the room, Renee's mother was sprawled on the floor, hair disheveled, wailing in despair. "My baby, you can't leave mommy behind." Just one glance, and all the blood in my body seemed to freeze. Renee lay on the bed, her face tinged blue, eyes tightly shut. She looked like a paper doll, her head drooping limply. She was still so small. "Esther, don't look." A hand covered my eyes from behind and guided me out of the room. My mind went completely blank, like a puppet on strings. I let Stephen lead me back to my ward. The puzzle pieces were still scattered on the table, half finished, never to be completed. Stephen wrapped his arms around me from behind. I suddenly laughed, hysterical, and turned to look at him. It's okay. In a few days, Renee and I will meet again. We can finish the puzzle together then. Esther, Stephen called out urgently. His tears fell onto my neck. Strange. I wasn't crying, so why was he? We'll go to the grasslands, Stephen suddenly said. Tomorrow. We'll leave tomorrow. Renee's mother's cries still echoed in my ears. I heard myself say softly, okay. Chapter 11. Even if Stephen hadn't come with me, I was planning to go by myself anyway. The day before Renee passed away, I had already booked a flight to Hylar. I just wasn't sure whether, on my own, I could even survive long enough to get off the plane. By the time we arrived in Hylar, I was so exhausted I could barely speak. Stephen looked extremely anxious. I've booked a hotel. Let's rest for today and go to the grasslands tomorrow, okay? I was so dizzy I could hardly open my eyes, but I still shook my head. No. Stephen sighed and had no choice but to give in to me. Stephen and I stayed at a local herder's home. They glanced at the two of us and asked Stephen in stiff Mandarin, have you been here before? You look familiar. Stephen shook his head. I drank half a bowl of goat's milk and then fell into a deep sleep for most of the day. When I woke up again, it was already pitch dark. They lit a bonfire and invited many friends over to roast a whole lamb. Stephen and I sat among them, joining in the lively atmosphere. Across the fire, Stephen kept staring at me. Even they patted him on the shoulder and teased, stop staring, your wife isn't going to run away. Everyone burst into laughter, and Stephen laughed along with them. Late at night, the crowd dispersed. The grassland grew so quiet that only the crackling of the flames could be heard. The bonfire was still dancing. Stephen and I lay sprawled out, staring up at the stars. So many of them. I wondered which one I would be. I pretended not to hear my own thoughts. The warm atmosphere seemed to cool all of a sudden. Stephen turned his head to look at me and murmured to himself, Esther, you're talking less and less. I remember how you used to share everything with me, good food, fun things, a new pair of pajamas you liked, your weight going up just a little, how some neighbor's kitten had the ugliest meow. You could describe it so vividly that it always sounded interesting. Once a friend brought some mountain specialty. It was supposed to be really rare. You couldn't bear to eat it and insisted on waiting for me to come back from a business trip. But it got hot and everything spoiled. You felt awful but couldn't bring yourself to throw it away. So we ate it anyway. We ended up with diarrhea all night and spent 2 days in the hospital on 4 drips. I couldn't hold it in and laughed. Seeing me smile, Stephen relaxed. He opened up completely, rambling on, but as I listened, my mind began to blur again. I suddenly grabbed the arm of the person beside me. Without caring what he was saying, I cut him off forcefully. Stephen, I bought a house outside the old district. The silk tree is still there. In the future, we can live there together. The photos on the walls, those memories, I'll leave them all to you. And there's one place I still haven't been to. There's only that one place left. I couldn't even tell what I was saying anymore. It wasn't until Stephen kept shaking me and calling my name that my vision finally focused. And I saw his face clearly. Stephen was crying again. He's become so easy to cry lately. He looks really ugly when he cries. He pulled me tightly into his arms, his voice disordered yet devout. Esther, before this, I was too stupid. I didn't understand my own heart. But the truth is, over these years, I already fell in love with you. I never let Wendy into our room, and I won't marry her either. Believe me. He looked at me nervously. Okay, I believe you. Before going to sleep, I handed Stephen a cup of milk. Watching him finish it, I finally let out a long breath. The flames gradually died down. I asked to call a car for me. The car sped through the night. The yurts in the distance grew farther and farther away. I deleted my chat with my college friend Jessica. She had told me that Stephen secretly contacted her, told her about my illness, and said that fortunately, a suitable bone marrow match had been found. He had already contacted a local hospital to arrange the surgery. He also asked her and the others to keep it from me and come check on me. Jessica had just given birth and hadn't even finished her confinement month. She couldn't come. She couldn't stop worrying and told me again and again to take good care of myself. Her little girl was still waiting to recognize me as her godmother. She didn't know. I never planned to have the surgery. Stephen wouldn't wake up until tomorrow. The milk he drank had sleeping pills mixed in, and by then, I would be thousands of miles away, by the sea, fulfilling my final wish. Chapter 12. I had thought about it for so long that even in my dreams, I could taste the salty sea breeze against my face. At last, I reached the ocean, like a final flicker before the light went out. My spirits lifted noticeably. The deep blue surface of the sea looked like a reflection of the sky, stretching endlessly to the horizon. Wave after wave rolled in, washing over my feet. Cold, yet I couldn't bear to step back. I remembered once attending a friend's wedding, watching the bride and groom on stage reciting their scripted vows with the officiant. I couldn't help turning to the person beside me and saying, "Stephen, when we get married, I don't want to stand on a stage reciting lines. That's so awkward. I want it by the sea, with the sound of waves, heaven and earth as witnesses, seagulls as our matchmakers. I'll say, please take care of me for the rest of my life." He smiled and ruffled my hair. "All right, whatever you want." Now, I was here. The sunlight was just right. The sea breeze, gentle, like a fish. I plunged headfirst into the icy seawater, stretching out my limbs. I didn't struggle. Scenes flashed through my mind like a spinning lantern. The noise of the world, its people and events, all retreating rapidly, farther and farther away. Those intense loves and hatreds faded as well. The seawater enveloped me, gentle, silent. In a daze, the light before my eyes suddenly burst open, halos growing softer and softer. Out of that brightness, someone walked toward me. He was dressed in a neat groom suit, smiling at me, his eyes warm, as if he had been waiting for a long time. Joy overflowed my chest. I gathered the long hem of my wedding dress and, like a little bird, crashed into his arms. "Esther," he said softly, "please take care of me for the rest of my life." Chapter 13. Stephen, extra. Esther lied to me. When I woke up the next morning in broad daylight, she was already gone. The host said she had taken a car and left in the middle of the night. As for where she went, he didn't know. I went crazy, searching everywhere. But she had vanished as if she'd evaporated from the world. There wasn't even a shadow of her to be found. When I went to report it to the police, I looked like an irritable husband who'd had a fight with his wife, cursing nonstop. I recounted what had happened the last time we met. As I spoke, I suddenly froze. Her incoherent words from last night rang in my ears. "There's still one place I haven't been to. Just one place left." I think I knew where Esther had gone. On the way to South City, I contacted the police in advance and reported my wife missing. So almost the moment I got off the plane, I received a call from them. I thought they had found Esther, but instead, the deceased has been confirmed as a suicide. We are currently salvaging the body. Please accept our condolences. A compatible bone marrow match had been found. I had confessed my feelings to her, and she smiled at me, saying that we would live together in the future. Everything had been moving in a good direction. This had to be a nightmare. My legs went weak, and I couldn't even stand. A police officer supported me lightly. After making sure I was steady, he handed me an amulet and a phone. He said these were the only two items found by the seaside. The amulet was old, one corner soaked through by seawater. She had climbed mountain after mountain to pray for it, even leaving a scar on her forehead. Yet I had casually tossed it onto a storage shelf and never worn it once. Yes, I treated her badly. Back then, Wendy had paraded around with her blonde, blue-eyed foreign boyfriend. I was mad with jealousy, so I shamelessly took advantage of Esther. She was very happy, as if she didn't mind at all. Every day she followed behind me, endlessly calling out, "Stephen, Stephen," brimming with energy, as though she never knew what it meant to be tired. She sorted my medicine by category. She could rattle off those tongue-twisting drug names and their effects with ease, so much so that even the attending physician was astonished. Like coaxing a child. Every time I took my medicine, she would grin and stuff a piece of soft candy into my mouth. "Good job. You get a reward." She studied recipes, prepared clothes of just the right thickness, and pulled me out for walks. She never deliberately mentioned the heart condition I was sensitive about. Yet she always managed to take perfect care of me. I don't know when it started, but my heart began to feel restless. It kept beating out of rhythm. Especially when she smiled at me, it was both sweet and painful. Now, she will never smile at me again. To provoke her, I deliberately said I would bring Wendy to the seaside to hold a wedding. Wendy must have told her. What was she feeling then? She must have been very sad. So she came alone to South City and chose to die in the sea. Was that her revenge on me? Esther, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to yourself? Just as I stepped out of the police station, I received a phone call. Hello, is this Mr. Steven? Hello, I'm from the wedding planning studio Miss Wendy previously contacted. All of our staff have already arrived at Tianya Haijiao. May I ask when you and your wife get lost? I said, get the hell away from me, get lost. As the dial tone sounded and the call disconnected, my heart seized with pain once again. Thinking about it now, this whole life of mine has been absurd. The only wedding photos I ever took were with Wendy. My mother liked Esther. She kept urging me to hurry up and get married. Then give her a big, chubby grandson. Yet I always felt it was Esther whispering into my mom's ear behind my back. I even snapped at her over it once. Esther, don't think I don't know you're the one egging my mom on. Esther, do you really want to marry me that badly? She bit her lip lightly, shaking her head like a rattle drum. It's not me. As if remembering something, she seemed to lose focus for a moment. I can't take wedding photos with someone else. Her voice was too soft. I wondered if I'd misheard and asked again. She shook her head and said it was nothing. Before Quinn got married, the bride was trying on wedding dresses. As a bridesmaid, Esther joined in the fun as well. When the curtain was drawn aside, she stepped out in tiny, shuffling steps, like a little penguin. In that instant, my breath was stolen from me. Her waist was slender, and the dazzling diamonds across her chest made her skin look like snow. Her jet black eyes looked straight at me, as if she were waiting for something. Suppressing my wildly pounding heart, I stubbornly scoffed. It's someone else's wedding. Why are you joining the fun? That wrinkled bridesmaid dress is what suits you. I don't know if it was my imagination, but the light in her eyes went out all at once. She awkwardly slipped back behind the curtain and didn't come out for a long time. Quinn shot me a sideways glance. Your mouth is really tough. Your eyes were glued to her. Yet you're still pretending. Yes, I was clearly overjoyed, yet still stubbornly denying it. My heart was clearly racing because of her. Yet I couldn't overcome my resentment and ended up entangled with Wendy. Esther, I was wrong. It felt like a massive stone was pressing down on my chest. The pain was so intense I could barely breathe, and the darkness before my eyes kept spreading. The pain exploded from the left side of my chest. I didn't call for help. I even felt a vague sense of relief. Maybe this was fate's best arrangement. When I got down there, I should apologize to her face to face. I heard sobbing near my ear. I opened my eyes, only to regretfully find myself lying in a hospital bed. Mom was sitting by the bedside, wiping her tears. When she saw me wake up, they fell again. You scared me to death. My child, thank goodness you were found in time. Mom, where is she? You've been in a coma for 7 days. Esther, still hasn't been found. Seeing something wrong with my expression, Mom didn't continue. She pointed behind her. This is Esther's college classmate. You two talk. Only then did I notice there was someone standing behind her. Her eyelids were swollen from crying, and she looked unfamiliar. I'm Jessica, Esther's college roommate. You contacted us before. I came to check on Esther. I remembered the small surprise we had planned for Esther. She always revolved around me and didn't have many close relatives or friends. Now, only I was left. Jessica sized me up from head to toe, then said, back in college, Esther always talked about you in the dorm. She said that when the time was right, she'd introduce the person she loved most to her best friends. I never thought. She choked up and couldn't go on, covering her face as she cried again. My heart began to hurt badly once more. I clutched my chest, waiting for the surging pain to gradually fade. The scene before my eyes slowly came back into focus. When she became my caregiver, she was in her senior year. Besides caregiving, she was juggling several part-time jobs at the same time. Sometimes I couldn't find her and grew terribly irritated. I'd simply drive my Bugatti to her university gate and block her there. After I had brushed off several girls who came over to flirt, the passenger door was suddenly pulled open. Someone wrapped up tightly slipped inside. Before I could say anything, she abruptly yanked down the scarf covering her face, revealing a pair of almond-shaped eyes. "Don't shout. It's me." I was baffled. "What are you doing? Acting all crazy." Someone passed by the car, and she immediately covered herself up again. No, this won't do. It's too high profile. I'm afraid rumors will spread at school tomorrow that I'm being kept by a sugar daddy, and that would affect my scholarship. All she had on her mind was money. I was thoroughly annoyed and asked her, "Then what do you think I should use to pick you up so it won't damage your noble reputation?" "Actually, there's no need," she said, then, seeing my expression darken, quickly added, "No need for something so fancy. A bicycle will do. Simple and romantic." Ungrateful. The next time I came to get her, I was standing at the school gate, pushing a bicycle. She looked at me oddly. "Why are you pushing it?" Then her eyes suddenly widened. "Don't tell me you don't know how to ride one?" I nodded resentfully. She wanted to laugh but didn't dare. Her face turned red from holding it in. All right. I can ride. I'll take you." She swung onto the bicycle deftly, then turned back to look at me. "Hop on, young master." I couldn't be bothered to argue and sat down on the back seat. The bicycle glided lightly along the asphalt road outside the campus. On both sides stood rows of plane trees, newly sprouting buds. There were plenty of people coming and going. She rode fast, nearly crashing into someone approaching from the opposite direction. She slammed on the brakes, and instinctively I wrapped my arms around her waist, slender, soft enough to encircle with one hand. She didn't say anything. I let my thoughts run wild the whole way. Later, as we met more and more often, I stopped going to wait at the school gate. Inside my chest, my heart thumped wildly, the stirrings of a young boy's first love suddenly becoming clear. That kind of flutter back then was like the tender buds on the plane trees, so small they were hard to see. After Jessica left, many people came and went, all telling me to look forward, not back. I stared out the window, silent. I wanted to look ahead too, but what lay ahead of me was pitch black. That lively, bouncing figure would never again stop ahead of me to wait just because I walked too slowly. Under the pillow was her phone. The screen was locked. I tried her birthday. Wrong. I froze for a moment, then entered my own birthday. With a crisp sound, the phone unlocked. That strange, turbulent feeling welled up in my chest again. Pressing a hand to it, I slowly began going through her phone. There was almost nothing, even the photo album was empty. The last call record was to an unfamiliar number with no name saved, marked with a number beside it, 2291. She had called that unnamed number 2291 times, all marked in red. Not once did it connect. Who was this number? I absent-mindedly rubbed the screen and accidentally tapped into the memo app. The voice notes inside were packed full. Her voice was sweet, tinged with what sounded like a smile. I listened to them one by one. "The weather doesn't look very good tomorrow. It might rain lightly. Remind Steven to bring an umbrella. The dragon fruit I bought from the supermarket today. I looked it up. Oh no. It's a high-sugar fruit. Steven can't eat it. Next time I must ask clearly before buying. I can't make such a stupid mistake again." My heart clenched into a tight knot again. "Steven, do you remember when we were little? You fell asleep lying on a tree branch, and no matter how loudly I called, you wouldn't wake up. I was so stupid, I panicked and ran around calling all the adults in the village, saying you were gone. Ha ha ha. Sorry. And also, I really miss you. When we were little." I listened to a few more recordings one after another. They were all about childhood, sneaking into other people's fields to steal watermelons and getting caught, catching bugs in the fields on rainy days and roasting them to eat, lying flat on thick ice in winter and chiseling holes to fish. She kept calling out Steven, yet all of it was completely unfamiliar to me. Suddenly, I remembered that night, how she had grabbed my hand and murmured hazily that she'd bought a house in the old district, that we would live there together in the future. I covered my face, and tears fell again. My Esther. She was so ill that even her memories had become scrambled. After I was discharged from the hospital, I went to the house she'd bought in the old district. Sure enough, there was a silk tree in front of it, tall and lush. I hesitated for a moment before finally stepping inside. The place wasn't big, and the furnishings were simple, no extra decorations at all. The door to her bedroom was shut tight. When I pushed it open, the wall covered in photographs immediately caught my attention. My emotions churned all at once. Over the past 6 years, we'd been to many places. I traced my fingers over the photos one by one. In the narrow alleys of South City, every casual snapshot looked like a postcard. An elderly woman by the roadside, braiding colorful threads into hair, called out to us, "Girl, you're so pretty, braids like this would look even better on you." The moment Esther heard that, her face turned pale. "No need. I don't like it." She spoke and fled as if for her life, so fast that even I couldn't keep up. Her mood was very low that day. It wasn't until she saw the jagged, magnificent jade dragon snow mountain that she finally smiled again. She said, "I finally get to see Jade Dragon Snow Mountain on a clear day." As she spoke, she kept pressing the shutter, taking photo after photo. I found it odd. "Have you been here before?" She just smiled and didn't answer. As I kept looking, a photograph of a stranger caught my eye. Tall and slender, single eyelids, dimples when he smiled, a roguishly handsome look that made him popular. 1 photo, 2, 3. I counted them. They took up fully half of the wall. In every single one, he was smiling sweetly, as if brimming with affection for the person behind the camera. When she was being tormented by illness, all she had to do was lift her head to see him. Who was he? A chill ran down my spine. After hesitating for a moment, I dialed Quinn's number. He ran a private investigation company, highly efficient. I sent him both the photos and that unfamiliar phone number. Sure enough, in less than 3 days, the information came back. The photos and the phone number belonged to the same person, Paul. Paul was the same age as me. We were even born on the same day. He and Esther were neighbors from a young age. He had been rebellious, constantly getting into fights and trouble. But around Esther, he behaved much more obediently. People in the village all said that Paul would definitely be henpecked in the future. Yet if anyone dared to say a single bad word about Esther, Paul would beat them so badly the next day that they'd be black and blue and unable to get out of bed. Later on, someone from the city sponsored their education, and Paul and Esther went off to school. Paul thrived there, surrounded by a whole gang of followers. Every time he got into trouble, it was Esther who went to the teachers to plead for him. Gradually, rumors spread at school that Esther was Paul's childhood betrothed. No one knew whether they had ever actually dated. They only knew that whenever Esther stayed late in the classroom studying, Paul's figure would always be nearby. Then one day, without warning, Paul was expelled from school. The reason? Fighting. He had helped a boy who was being bullied and ended up offending the principal's nephew. In the face of power, not a single person was willing to stand up and speak for him. Not even the boy he had helped. Only Esther told the truth. But who would believe it? Or perhaps, who would dare to believe it? Everyone thought that once Paul dropped out of school, his life was as good as ruined. But instead, he started selling fried noodles. He had a sharp business mind. Very quickly, he learned how to run a business and deal with all kinds of people. The year Esther got into university, her grandmother passed away, and Paul opened a small restaurant right outside the school gates. Business was booming. The sponsorship from the city was cut off. Esther had to earn her tuition and her living expenses as well. She was tricked by a friend into accompanying drinks at a nightclub and almost got assaulted. It was Paul, wielding a gleaming butcher's knife. He saved her. After Esther entered university, she excelled academically. The scholarship went to her every single year. She rarely socialized and worked several part-time jobs at the same time. From time to time, Paul would close his shop and go to the school gate to pick her up. Afraid he smelled of food, he never went too close to the gate. He would wait at a distance. He rode a bicycle, carrying Esther with him, passing along that road lined with plane trees. With the money he saved from selling fried noodles, he took Esther to see many different landscapes. Life kept getting better, and the two of them even discussed going to South City to get married. But right at that moment, Paul died, right beside his fried noodle shop. Blood spreading everywhere, soaking the ground. Paul had been stabbed more than 30 times. By the time he was rushed to the hospital, he had already stopped breathing. Before his death, he had signed an organ donation agreement. Reading this, my heart was about to leap out of my throat. I scrolled frantically, and finally, at the very end of the document, I saw my own name. Heart recipient, Stephen. My mind went completely blank. I raised a hand to my chest. The heart pounding beneath my ribs was Paul's heart. So that was why. She was always so careful with me, never speaking loudly, afraid of overstimulating me. Everyone called me Stephen, yet only she insisted on calling me Stephen. Not long after we started living together, she suggested traveling, even planning all the routes and destinations in advance, all because of this heart. I thought of those voice memos I hadn't understood before. Paul, one day we'll buy a house. It doesn't need to be big, just enough for you and me. There has to be a tree in the yard, tall and strong. In summer, we'll sit on wicker chairs and gently rock. Oh, and we need to tie up a swing. You can push me. So that 500,000, it was used to buy the house of their dreams. Then what about me? What was I supposed to be? Unwilling to accept it, I reached for the amulet on my chest. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I had to find something, anything, that could prove her feelings for me were real. But when I opened the slip of paper inside the amulet, what I saw was Paul's name and his birth date. Esther, you liar. Clutching my heart, I rushed out the door. Esther, why did you lie to me? Was all your kindness toward me fake? How much of it was ever real? Did you ever love me, at all? Esther, come back to life. Tell me. Esther, when Wendy found me by the sea, I had already been lying on the beach like a dead fish for 3 days. From the look of disgust in her eyes, I knew my current state must have been utterly miserable. I ignored her. She got so angry that she smashed her bag against me. Stephen, what kind of fake devotion are you putting on? You were the one who wavered back and forth. You were the one who slapped Esther and then turned around and proposed to me. Now that she's gone, you act like you're ready to die. Who are you performing this for? It hit me all at once. So I had treated her that badly. So I had been that stupid, that selfish. So I had liked her long ago. After Wendy left, I touched the amulet around my neck and returned to Esther's old house. Deep in my memories were scenes of her arguing fiercely with a burly, tattooed man over 50 yuan in caregiver fees, of her leaning close to my chest to secretly listen to my heartbeat, of her solemnly pressing the amulet into my hand, of her lively figure, worrying every day that I had lost more weight, that I wasn't wearing enough, that I wasn't being obedient. What she wanted to protect might have only been this heart, but what I wanted to protect was all of her. What a pity. Clearly, I could have held on to her, treated her well, made her fall in love with me, even if it was because of the heart beating in my chest. She would have looked at me one more time. If I had realized it earlier, would our ending have been different? But there are no ifs. I took out my phone, plugged it in, and dialed her number. The ringtone echoed through the entire old house. It's a pity it wasn't you who stayed with me till the end. Esther, the silk tree has bloomed. Red blossoms. They're really beautiful.